The sleek diplomatic vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, its silver hull gleaming in the morning sunlight. Inside, Lily clutched her data pad tightly against her chest, her large violet eyes widening as the sprawling skyline of New York City came into view. At just 3 feet and 2 inches tall, the young Luminian diplomat had thought she was prepared for everything Earth had to offer. She was wrong. "By the ancient stars," she whispered, pressing her face against the viewport. The buildings weren't just tall, they were gigantic. On her homeworld, the tallest structures reached perhaps 30 feet. These metal and glass monsters stretched up for hundreds of feet, disappearing into the clouds. The ship's AI announced their final approach to the United Nations landing pad. Lily straightened her formal robes, a shimmering fabric that reflected her people's love of starlight. Her antenna twitched nervously, picking up the various electromagnetic frequencies from the human city. Everything about Earth felt massive. As the ship's door opened with a soft hiss, Lily took her first breath of Earth air. The gravity was stronger than she was used to, making her feel even smaller than usual. A group of human officials waited on the landing pad, and Lily felt her heart skip a beat. The briefings hadn't prepared her for this. The humans were giants. The smallest among them stood at least twice her height. They wore what her briefings had called suits and ties, but seeing them in person was entirely different from the images she'd studied. One of them stepped forward, and Lily had to tilt her head back almost completely to see their face. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Lily," the human said, their voice deep but gentle. "I'm Representative Adams from the United Nations Extraterrestrial Relations Committee." Lily managed to keep her diplomatic composure, even as she felt dwarfed by everything around her. "Thank you for your welcome, Representative Adams. I bring greetings from the Luminian High Council." Her translator device worked perfectly, but she felt like a child speaking to adults. The walk through the UN building became an exercise in maintaining dignity while being constantly reminded of her size. The doors were enormous, the corridors stretched up forever, and even the potted plants seemed to tower over her. Every human they passed stopped to stare, though most tried to be polite about it. "Here's your office," Adams said, opening a door. "We've made some modifications for your comfort." Lily stepped inside and finally felt some relief. The humans had clearly put thought into accommodating her. There was a scaled-down desk and chair, smaller filing cabinets, and even a custom-made computer terminal with buttons she could easily reach. A stepladder was discreetly positioned near the taller shelves. "This is very thoughtful," she said, genuinely touched by the consideration. "We want you to feel at home here," Adams replied, still looming in the doorway. "Your residential quarters have been similarly adapted. And please don't hesitate to ask if you need anything adjusted." Left alone in her office, Lily climbed into her chair and took a moment to process everything. The view from her window showed the bustling city below, with humans walking about like moving buildings. Cars, which she'd only seen in briefing materials, looked like massive moving boxes. She opened her data pad and began her first official report. "Arrived safely on Earth. Initial observations. Everything here is beyond scale of previous expectations. Humans have shown considerable thoughtfulness and accommodations, but their sheer size remains intimidating. Most pressing concern: how does one conduct diplomatic relations when having to constantly look up at such an angle? Must remember to pack anti-neck strain medication for future meetings." Looking out at the city again, Lily added a personal note. Despite initial shock, there's something fascinating about their scale. They've built everything so big, yet they move with surprising grace for their size. Perhaps there's more to learn here than just diplomatic protocols. End report. She closed her data pad and stood up, straightening her robes. This was just the beginning of her mission, and she had a lot to learn about these gentle giants. At least they seemed kind, even if they were terrifyingly huge. The next morning arrived with a gentle knock on Lily's office door. She looked up from her data pad, where she had been reviewing Earth customs for the 100th time. "Come in," she called out, then watched as the door opened to reveal what could only be described as a mountain of a being. Her antenna trembled slightly. "Hello, Ambassador Lily. I'm Tom Walker, your assigned diplomatic liaison. The human had to duck slightly to enter the doorway. At 6 feet tall, he was what humans considered average height. But to Lily, he might as well have been a living skyscraper. Tom smiled warmly and took a careful step forward. He moved slowly, clearly trying not to startle her. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Lily stood up on her chair to reduce the height difference somewhat. It didn't help much. Not at all, Mr. Walker. I was just studying. She tried to maintain eye contact, but found herself developing a slight crick in her neck. Noticing her discomfort, Tom pulled up one of the human-sized chairs and sat down, bringing himself closer to her level. Please, call me Tom. And you don't need to strain yourself looking up. We can figure out a more comfortable way to talk. The thoughtful gesture didn't go unnoticed. Lily felt some of her tension ease. Thank you, Tom. I must admit, I'm still adjusting to the scale of everything here. I can imagine. Tom chuckled, the sound warm and friendly. I heard you had quite the reaction to our coffee cups yesterday. Lily's violet cheeks darkened with embarrassment. During her first meeting, someone had offered her a standard Earth coffee mug. The cup had been nearly half her height. In my defense, I thought it was a soup bowl at first. They both laughed, breaking some of the initial awkwardness. Tom pulled out a tablet and showed her a modified schedule he prepared. I took the liberty of planning our first week. We'll start with a tour of the smaller conference rooms, then gradually work our way up to larger spaces as you get comfortable. As they discussed the schedule, Lily noticed something interesting. Despite his enormous size, Tom moved with careful precision. He kept his gestures minimal, and his voice modulated. Every action seemed calculated to appear less intimidating. Oh, Tom suddenly remembered something and reached into his briefcase. I had this made for you. He pulled out what looked like a small hovering platform. It's a personal lift. You can use it during meetings to stay at eye level with everyone else. The controls are adapted for your size. Lily's eyes widened. The device was perfectly scaled for her, with simple controls and safety rails. This is incredibly thoughtful. Give it a try, Tom encouraged. With some hesitation, Lily stepped onto the platform. It hummed softly and lifted her smoothly until she was at eye level with Tom's seated position. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she didn't have to crane her neck to have a conversation. The irony isn't lost on me, she said, testing the simple up and down controls. I came from a species that built everything small, yet you humans seem better at accommodating different sizes than we ever were. Tom nodded thoughtfully. We've had lots of practice. Humans come in many sizes too, just not quite as dramatic as our difference. It's taught us to be adaptable. Their conversation was interrupted by Tom's phone ringing. The sound made Lily jump slightly, and the platform wobbled. Tom's hand shot out instinctively to steady it, but he stopped just short of touching it, respecting her space. Sorry about that, he said, silencing the phone. Ready to start the tour. First stop is the Diplomatic Lounge. They make excellent small-sized pastries. Lily smiled, already feeling more at ease. Lead the way, Tom. Maybe we can walk slowly. Your one step equals about 5 of mine, even with this wonderful platform. As they left the office together, Lily realized something important. Perhaps the size difference wasn't going to be as big a problem as she'd feared. After all, it wasn't the size of the human that mattered, but rather how they used that size to help others. After a week on Earth, Lily thought she was finally getting used to the scale of things. Then came the dinner party. The UN was hosting a formal dinner for all diplomatic representatives, and Lily spent hours preparing. She wore her finest ceremonial robe and even attempted to style her antenna in what she hoped was a formal Earth fashion. Tom had assured her everything would be properly arranged. Ambassador Lily. The host greeted her as she entered the grand dining hall. Your place is right this way. Lily followed, hovering on her platform, only to stop dead in her tracks at the sight of the dining table. It was like looking at a flat mountain stretching into the distance. The table's surface was at the height of her shoulders, even with her platform raised. Tom appeared beside her, noticing her distress. "Is everything all right?" "The table," she whispered. "It's a bit overwhelming." Before Tom could respond, a waiter appeared with what humans considered a normal-sized soup spoon. To Lily, it looked like a serving ladle from her home world. Her antenna drooped slightly. "Oh no," Tom said quickly, recognizing the problem. "There's been a mix-up. This isn't your table." He guided her to a smaller section of the room, where several other alien species of varying sizes were seated at appropriately scaled furniture. Lily felt relief wash over her, but then noticed something that made her antenna twist in embarrassment. "Tom," she whispered, "why are all the smaller species seated together? Are we at the children's table?" Tom's eyes widened. No, it's just practical arrangement based on size. See, the Centaurians are at extra-large tables because they're even bigger than humans." As if to prove his point, a 12-foot-tall Centaurian diplomat ducked through a special doorway, making even the humans look small. During the meal, Lily found herself fascinated by how different species handled their eating utensils. Her own plate and cutlery were perfectly sized, but watching the human cut their steak with what looked to her like sword-sized knives was both terrifying and amusing. "I have a confession," she told Tom, who had chosen to sit at the smaller table with her despite how comical he looked hunched over it. "When I first saw human eating utensils, I thought they were weapons." Tom nearly choked on his water, trying not to laugh. "Really? What else did you mistake?" Lily's antenna wiggled in amusement. "Well, I thought doorknobs were exercise equipment. And don't get me started on umbrellas. I was convinced they were portable shelters for entire families." Their laughter attracted attention from nearby tables. A human diplomat overheard and shared his own story about accidentally terrifying a miniature alien species by yawning. Soon, the entire section was sharing stories of cultural misunderstandings. "The funniest moment," Lily added, feeling more confident, "was when I saw my first human bed. I thought it was a public swimming pool." As the evening progressed, Lily realized something important. Every species, regardless of size, had their own embarrassing stories about first contact. Even the massive Centaurians admitted they'd been scared of tiny Earth insects at first, thinking they were some kind of micro-predator. Later, during the dessert course, Tom brought her a human-sized chocolate cake on a serving plate. "Want to see something fun?" he asked. Lily nodded, curious. "From your perspective," he said, placing the cake beside her, "this is what a wedding cake looks like to us." She circled the cake on her platform, amazed by this new perspective. "It's beautiful, but how would I ever eat something this size?" "The same way humans tackle big challenges," Tom smiled. "One bite at a time." As the evening came to a close, Lily made a note in her datapad. Cultural understanding isn't just about adapting to size differences. It's about finding humor in our differences and learning to see things from new perspectives. Also, human desserts are delicious, even if they do look like edible buildings. She looked around the room, seeing humans and aliens of all sizes mingling, laughing, and sharing stories. Maybe, she thought, being different sizes wasn't a barrier. It was an opportunity to see the universe from angles she'd never imagined before. The emergency meeting alarm blared through the UN building, making Lily's antenna vibrate uncomfortably. She rushed to the main conference hall on her hover platform, her heart racing. The usually calm diplomatic center was in chaos. The cause of the disruption became clear as soon as she entered. A delegation of Thoraxians, known for their militant stance and impressive array of natural armor, stood at the center of the room. Their leader, Commander Dox, was pointing accusingly at the human representatives. "These humans are too dangerous." Dox's voice boomed through the hall. "Look at their size, their strength. They could crush smaller species without even trying." Lily watched from her elevated platform as Tom and other human diplomats tried to maintain calm. The Thoraxians, standing at around 4 feet tall, were clearly trying to make up for their size with aggressive posturing. "Commander Dox," Tom spoke softly, deliberately making himself appear less threatening by sitting down. "Size isn't an indicator of peaceful intentions." "Lies." Dox slammed his armored fist on the table. We've seen your weapons, your vehicles, your buildings. Everything about humans is designed to intimidate. The situation got worse when a human security guard, responding to the commotion, accidentally bumped into a Thoraxian delegate. Though the contact was minimal, Doc seized on it immediately. C. Violence. They cannot control their massive bodies. Docs turned to the other alien representatives. We demand immediate sanctions against Earth. Any species this large cannot be trusted in the galactic community. Lily felt her antenna twitch with irritation. Without thinking, she guided her platform forward into the center of the room. Commander Docs, she spoke up, her voice clear despite its softness. May I share my experience with the humans? The Thoraxian commander turned, seemingly surprised to see someone even smaller than his species joining the discussion. Speak then, tiny one. Lily straightened herself to her full height of 3 feet and 2 inches. When I first arrived on Earth, I was terrified. Everything was enormous. The buildings, the furniture, even the eating utensils looked like weapons to me. She gestured to Tom. But do you know what I discovered? The humans spent weeks preparing for my arrival. They built custom furniture, modified their facilities, and created special tools just so I could feel comfortable. Moving her platform closer to Doc's, she continued, I've seen humans duck through doorways, bend down to hear me better, and carefully adjust their movements to make smaller species feel safe. They're more aware of their size than anyone. But their potential for destruction, Doc started, is no different from any species. Lily interrupted. I once accidentally stepped on a human's cherished garden plant because I didn't see it from my height. Size works both ways. Commander. Tom stood up slowly, careful to maintain a non-threatening posture. Commander Docs, humanity understands your concerns. We've learned to be careful precisely because we know our size can be intimidating. That's why we focus so much on accommodation and adaptation. Other alien representatives began nodding in agreement. A tiny microbian ambassador, barely 6 inches tall, floated forward on their own platform. The humans built me an entire city-scale environment inside a single room, they chimed in. They're gentle giants. Doc's aggressive posture began to falter as more species shared similar experiences. Lily could see the commander's natural armor plates shifting uncomfortably. Perhaps, Docs finally said, we may have been hasty in our judgment. The tension in the room began to dissolve. Tom caught Lily's eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. A human gesture she had learned meant approval. Later, after the crisis had been fully resolved, Tom found Lily in her office. That was quite a speech, he said, sitting down to be at her eye level. I just spoke the truth, Lily replied, her antenna swaying gently. It's funny. When I first arrived, I thought humans were too big to ever understand smaller species. Now I realize that being big has taught humans to be extra careful and considerate. Sometimes, Tom smiled, the biggest things can have the gentlest touch. Lily made a note in her data pad. Crisis averted. Learn today that true strength isn't about physical size. It's about how you use whatever size you have to help others feel comfortable and safe. A month after the Thoraxian incident, Lily found herself in an unexpected place, a human elementary school. The UN's Cultural Exchange Program had arranged for alien diplomats to visit various Earth institutions, and Lily had specifically requested to see how young humans learned. The children might be a bit excited, Tom warned as they walked down the hallway. They've never met a Luminian before. Lily nodded from her hover platform, which now felt as natural to use as walking. How tall are human children? She asked, realizing she'd only seen adult humans so far. Her question was answered when they entered the classroom. 20 third graders, all around 4 feet tall, turned to stare at her with wide eyes. For the first time on Earth, Lily found herself looking down at humans, even if only slightly. Class, this is Ambassador Lily from the Luminian High Council. The teacher introduced her. She's here to learn about our school, and you can ask her questions too. A forest of small hands shot up immediately. Tom smiled and stepped back, letting Lily handle the situation. Why are you so tiny? One child asked directly, earning a stern look from the teacher. Instead of being offended, Lily laughed. On my world, I'm actually quite normal-sized. Everything on Earth just looks giant to me. Imagine if you went to a planet where everything was built for someone as tall as 3 houses stacked on top of each other. The children's eyes grew wider, and more hands shot up. Do you have trouble reaching things? Another child asked. Sometimes, Lily admitted, but humans have been very creative in helping me. See this platform? It helps me reach whatever height I need. One quiet girl in the back raised her hand. Do you ever feel scared because everything is so big? The question caught Lily off guard with its perceptiveness. She lowered her platform to be at the children's eye level. At first I was very scared, she said honestly, but then I learned something important. Being big or small doesn't make someone good or bad. What matters is how they treat others. The children nodded thoughtfully. Then one boy raised his hand and asked, "Can we show you our science project? We made a model of the solar system." Lily followed the excited children to a corner of the room where a large model hung from the ceiling. For once, she found herself appreciating Earth's scale. The model was at perfect height for her to examine closely. "See, Jupiter is the biggest planet," a girl explained proudly. "But even though it's huge, it doesn't hurt the smaller planets. They all work together in harmony." Tom, who had been watching quietly, raised an eyebrow at the unexpectedly profound observation. During lunch break, the children invited Lily to sit with them. Their tables and chairs were much closer to her size than adult furniture. They shared their sandwiches, still huge by her standards, and asked about her world. "Do you have schools there?" one child asked. "Yes, but they're very different," Lily explained. "Our buildings are much smaller, and we learn a lot about living in low gravity. But we never learned much about other species until now." "That's sad," a little boy said. "Our teacher says learning about different people helps us understand better." Later, as they left the school, Lily was unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" Tom asked. "Those children," she said thoughtfully, "they didn't see my size as strange or scary. They were just curious. And they understood something that even adult diplomats sometimes forget, that differences in size don't have to be barriers." She made a note in her data pad, visited Earth School today, discovered that human children naturally understand what adult diplomats struggle with, that size is just a physical trait, not a measure of worth or capability. Perhaps we should all approach diplomacy with a child's openness to differences. Looking up at Tom, who still towered over her, Lily smiled. "You know, I haven't had to use my neck strain medication for weeks now." "Because of the hover platform?" Tom asked. "No," she replied. "Because I stopped seeing humans as giants and started seeing them as people who just happened to be tall." The day of Lily's address to the Galactic Assembly arrived sooner than she expected. The massive assembly hall on the neutral space station was filled with representatives from over 100 species. Some were tiny like the microbians, others towered like the centaurians, and everywhere in between sat species of all shapes and sizes. Her hover platform felt steady beneath her feet as she moved to the central speaking position. Tom sat in the human section, giving her an encouraging nod. The past few months had taught her more than she could have imagined about size, perspective, and understanding. "Distinguished members of the Assembly," Lily began, her voice clear through the universal translators. "When I first arrived on Earth, I was terrified. Everything was enormous. The buildings looked like mountains, the vehicles like moving buildings, and the humans." She paused for effect. "The humans seemed like giants from ancient stories." Murmurs of agreement came from the smaller species in the audience. "But today, I'm not here to talk about how big humans are. I'm here to talk about how big their hearts are." She pressed a button on her platform, displaying holographic images from her time on Earth. The first showed a human carefully holding a tiny microbian environmental pod, their huge hands gentle and precise. Humans understand their size better than we give them credit for. They spend enormous resources making their world accessible to smaller species. They build custom furniture, create specialized tools, and modify their environments. Not because they have to, but because they want to. The next image showed the elementary school children sharing their lunch with her. Their young ones are taught from an early age to be careful around those smaller than themselves. They learn that being bigger means having more responsibility to be gentle, not more right to be forceful. Several larger species shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps recognizing their own prejudices. But the most remarkable thing I've learned, Lily continued, her antenna glowing slightly with emotion, is that humans have turned what could have been their greatest diplomatic weakness into their greatest strength. She showed an image of Tom bending down to hear a tiny alien diplomat better, his whole posture carefully designed to appear non-threatening. They duck through doorways meant for smaller species without complaint. They crouch or sit to stay at eye level during conversations. They've developed countless technologies to help different-sized species interact comfortably. When was the last time any of us made such efforts to accommodate others? The assembly hall was silent now, every species listening intently. Some say humans are too big to be trusted in galactic politics. I say they're exactly what we need. A species that understands that with great size comes great responsibility to care for others. Lily's platform rose slightly higher as she delivered her final points. Look around this room. We're all different sizes. Some of us could accidentally step on others, while some could easily get lost in the shadows of the larger species. But humans have shown me that these differences don't have to divide us. They can unite us, if we learn to see them as opportunities for understanding rather than barriers. She displayed one final image, the solar system model from the school, with its planets of varying sizes all orbiting in harmony. Like these planets, we can exist together despite our differences. The humans didn't just teach me to stop being afraid of big things. They taught me that sometimes the biggest things can have the gentlest touch, and the smallest voices can carry the largest truths. As she finished her speech, the assembly hall erupted in applause. Species of all sizes showed their approval in their own ways, some with tentacles waving, others with bioluminescent displays, and the humans with their thunderous clapping. Tom made his way to her platform after the speech, careful not to bump into any smaller species. That was amazing, Lily. She looked up at him, remembering how terrifying his height had once seemed. I just told them what I learned on Earth. Sometimes the best way to understand something is to look at it from a different perspective, even if that perspective is 3 feet off the ground. Her datapad note that evening was simple. Today I spoke about size, but really I spoke about understanding. The universe is big enough for all of us, no matter our scale. 6 months after her arrival on Earth, Lily stood in her newly renovated permanent office at the UN building. The space had been completely redesigned, not just to accommodate her size, but to serve as a model for future interspecies diplomatic spaces. What do you think? Tom asked, standing in the doorway. The architects really took your suggestions seriously. Lily guided her hover platform around the room, admiring the innovative design. The office featured multiple levels with ramps and platforms, allowing beings of any size to find comfortable meeting spaces. The furniture was modular, able to adjust to various species' needs. It's perfect, she said, landing her platform on a mid-level conference area. Though I can't believe how different everything feels now compared to my first day. Speaking of which, Tom pulled out a small package from his jacket pocket. Happy 6-month Earth anniversary. Lily carefully opened the gift. Inside was a miniature replica of the New York skyline, scaled perfectly to her size. What had once seemed overwhelmingly huge now looked charming in miniature. Look at the little Empire State Building, she laughed, picking it up. Hard to believe this once terrified me. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several diplomats. A towering Centaurian, 2 human ambassadors, and a tiny microbian representative, all coming for their scheduled meeting. Please, make yourselves comfortable. Lily gestured to the various sized seating arrangements. She watched with pride as each species found their perfect spot, no one feeling out of place or awkward. The meeting proceeded smoothly, with everyone able to participate equally thanks to the room's design. The Centaurian didn't have to crouch, the microbian could be seen and heard clearly, and the humans didn't have to worry about accidentally bumping into anything. Your office has become quite popular. One of the human ambassadors commented after the meeting. Everyone's talking about making their spaces more inclusive. Lily's antenna glowed with pride. It's amazing what can happen when we stop seeing differences as problems and start seeing them as opportunities for innovation. Later that day, she received a call from the Luminian High Council. They had reviewed her latest reports and had an important request. "We want you to help design our new Galactic Welcome Center," the council had announced. "Your experience with humans has given you unique insights into multi-species accommodation." "I'd be honored," Lily replied, "though I'll need some help." She glanced at Tom, who was pretending not to eavesdrop from his desk. That evening, as they were finishing up their work, Tom noticed Lily staring out the window at the city lights. "Credit for your thoughts?" he asked, using the Earth phrase she'd grown fond of. "I was just thinking about my first message home," she said, pulling up her old datapad. "Look at what I wrote. Everything here is beyond scale of previous expectations." "Well, you weren't wrong," Tom chuckled. "No, but I didn't understand then what I know now." Lily's antenna swayed thoughtfully. It wasn't just the physical scale that was beyond expectations. It was the scale of human adaptability, creativity, and consideration. She moved her platform to eye level with Tom, a motion that now felt as natural as breathing. "You know, on my world, we have a saying. The smallest star still adds to the galaxy's light. I used to think it meant that even small beings like us matter. Now I understand it differently." "How so?" "It's not about size at all. It's about contribution. Humans taught me that by showing how the biggest beings can make themselves smaller to help others feel bigger." Lily made her final data pad entry for the day. 6 months ago, I arrived on Earth thinking everything was too big. Today, I realize nothing is too big or too small. It's all about perspective. The humans didn't just accommodate my size. They helped me grow in ways that had nothing to do with physical height. Sometimes the biggest changes come in the smallest packages. She looked around her office, where beings of all sizes could now meet comfortably, and smiled. In the end, she hadn't just learned to cope with human size. She'd learned that in the vastness of space, there was room for everyone to fit perfectly, exactly as they were.